How's it going, everybody? Just stoking the fire for another cold day out in the shop. Been working on the rear cross member for the coilover mounts for the rear end, and it looked like a pretty easy task from all the videos and the books that I read, but this little what used to be a 6x6 square tubing represents about 12 hours, maybe not that much. Let's see, 6.5 hours yesterday, 3 hours on Wednesday, and about 2.5 hours on Tuesday of cutting, notching, fitting, pulling out, and test fitting. And it's easier said than done. It's definitely doable, but that hole got a little bit large. It's ready to be welded in, but I've got a couple of gaps that are 3/8 of an inch or so, and the rest of it fits pretty tight. I watched the installation video for the Quadralink suspension by Detroit Speed on YouTube, and between that video and the book called Pro Touring by Mark Stilo, which is an amazing resource and a book, I think I'm ready to install it. They give you measurements and not really many installation tips. I think each car is pretty close to similar, but has enough variances that each one just requires a little bit of extra fitting. I cut this hole out from the measurements on the Detroit Speed video, and they also have instruction PDF online, very easy to find. It's under 69 Camaro Quadralink suspension install. The only things that I really didn't see in that video is this flange here, where the frame, the subframe from the unibody kind of mounts to the floorboard and is pinched together and spot welded. They didn't really say what to do there. They make a closeout panel, but I notched it a little bit so that my cross member would fit in there. But man, you have to do some serious yoga because it's right underneath where the trunk mounts, and then you're also fighting the package tray and the bracing for the rear seat and the package tray. So it's kind of tight. I found it pretty difficult to get accurate measurements, but I think it's ready to go. I've notched it literally 30 or 40 times. And one side's at an angle with kind of a bevel for the inner fender wells. I am not mini tubbing this car. I don't ever see running bigger than 275 rear tires with the all-wheel drive. But I guess if I ever did it in the future, I could add mini tubs at a later date. But right now, I'm just getting ready to set this in place, hopefully for the final time, and stitch weld it in. I'm gonna spare you from the obligatory time lapse of stitch welding that everybody else seems to be keen to videotape, and I usually fast forward when I'm watching it. But I still need to clean up some of this trunk, I don't know what, factory coating. It's kind of thick, smells kind of like BO when you grind it. But I'm going to clean up this area that I've marked. I've already cleaned up along the edge, and then I need to clean up that area to get down to bare steel. And I'll probably wire wheel this or use a grinder to get nice bright metal for welding. And then the other thing that I did, which maybe it's clever. Maybe if I was a better fabricator, I wouldn't need to make little workarounds, but I made this little wedge and beveled it on opposite sides so that I can slide it into that channel and use a hammer to wedge it out. It's slightly oversized. This, like I was saying, this used to be a 6x6 square tubing, but when I cut off the top part right here, it kind of sprung in, and so I have to use wood wedges to get it out to its true width. And then in the areas where my gap's a little bit fatter than I like, I have one of these wedges that I'm going to use to spring it out, maybe an additional 1/8 of an inch, maybe an 1/8 of an inch strong, just to try to close up that gap so I'm not filling it with wire. So hopefully that'll wrap up the this cross member piece. I can get it all ground and looking at least good enough for paint. I think with this 6x6 channel, as much as I love welding overhead, I think it's going to be easier to put the shock tabs in after the fact, after it's welded in place. And then the reason I jumped from the motor mounts to that aspect of the project is because in order to install these front axles to locate the motor, which I don't know if I mentioned it in the previous video, but the motor is actually offset 2 inches to the passenger side, and I'm assuming it's to clear the differential here, but I wanted to get the axles in so that it's perfectly centered before I built the motor mounts. And once I got to this point of the project, I figured I should go ahead and replace the upper and lower ball joints because these are looking pretty ratty, and I think they have about 175,000 miles on them if I remember correctly. So I made an order from Rock Auto, did a bunch of research, and this Mevotech seems to be the cheapest factory quality part available. And for the upper and lower ball joints, it was, I think they were $12 a piece plus $10 shipping and handling altogether. So oh, the other useful thing that I did from those Detroit Speed videos was I took screenshots and I printed them out. This is going to be this is the closeout panel and locating bracket that Detroit Speed offers as part of their Quadralink setup for the panhard bar or track bar, depending on what you call it. So I'll probably try to make that. I don't know. Looks like there might be a simpler solution. In that Pro Touring book that I was talking about, Mark Stilo basically just welds 1x2 square tubing to one of the edges of this load box for the coilovers that sticks out about 6 or 8 inches, and it's got a couple of mounting points for a panhard bar. So that might be easier, although not as aesthetically pleasing. So anyways, that's where I'm at now. Hoping to have that all welded up by today, and then hopefully by the end of this week maybe I'll make another video showing how I did the motor mounts. Not quite sure how or where to do them yet. I've kind of been brainstorming quite a bit. That's where the motor plates go, but this engine's sitting about 2 or 3 inches lower than the factory location, so I'm not using the factory motor mounts, which would have been nice, but they stick the motor up probably 6 inches over where it's sitting now, and I just wouldn't be able to close the hood. But they're, not to mention that the factory motor mounts are a cast steel piece, and they weigh a ton. This probably weighs, I'd guess, at least 5 pounds, but they're pretty slick. They just slide right on here. Screw it, that side's too tight. Anyways, they slide on here. I haven't figured out how to utilize that pedestal for my mount, because not only am I a couple inches lower, but as you can see, maybe you can see, I'm about, let's see if that's the motor mount and that's the tab. I'm probably sitting back 3 to 4 inches further towards the firewall than the factory motor sits. And that could be, I don't know, just because of the way they mount the engine in the Trailblazer. So that's about it for the rear load box for the coilovers. I also made the decision I'm going to list my factory T56 from the 99 Camaro, which is only rated at like 400 foot-pounds. And I was able to score a T56 Magnum for a screaming deal, with a bigger output shaft. It's got a really nice shifter from a super cool guy in the Bay Area. Has an Instagram page called Just an Old C10. Guy does super killer stuff, really creative, kind of an old school mentality tinkerer. But I got this transmission from him, and I want to use that in place because I think it's factory rated at 700 foot-pounds of torque, which should be sufficient to hold up to my horsepower goals. Let's see. Also, I think after I tackle the motor mounts, I'm going to crawl under here and start figuring out a 4-link suspension, also based off the mounting points from Detroit Speed's Quadralink setup, which requires cutting a hole. I don't know. I'm going to try to call Detroit Speed and see if they'll give me just the instruction manual or the template. I haven't been able to find it online yet, but they basically cut a hole in the floor here and make a load box that sticks up about 4 or 5 inches, and then has a mount for the upper control arms, 4-link bars, whatever you call them. So I'm going to build a 4-link based off of Detroit Speed stuff. Those guys are amazing, and their products are probably worth every penny, but being a cheapskate and somebody that likes to tinker, I want to try to build it myself. And I'm also thinking that since I'm going to use this Trailblazer rear end that already has mounts on it, that I might try to replace these factory rubber bushings. I don't know, they look like they're actually in pretty good shape. So I might just replace this center section with some 1-inch by either 065 or 083 tubing. It seems pretty small to me, but that's what Mark Stilo used, and he's an engineer for GM. He worked on the brand new Z28 Camaro, and the guy has just ridiculous amounts of knowledge on suspension stuff. And if he says that 1-inch OD tubing with an 065 wall is strong enough for 1,000 horsepower, I trust him, even if it looks kind of weenie. So I might cut these off here, utilize these same upper mounts, and then just fill in with a piece of metal that's the size that I can use, or that the length that I need for my car. And then I'll probably also, since it's already here and looks pretty beefy, utilize this panhard bar. Looks hell for stout. The bushings look in pretty good shape, and I guess if I want to at a later date, I can upgrade them to polyurethane, although I'm not all that convinced that polyurethane's the end-all be-all of suspension stuff. This just, oh, another note, this Trailblazer rear end is basically like an 8.2 inch 10 bolt. If I had known the extended length version of the Trailblazer comes with an 8.6 inch ring gear, and the Trailblazer SS comes with basically a 12 bolt rear end, which is equivalent to a Ford 9 inch power handling wise. But if I utilize and build everything off of this rear end, I should be able to, at a later date, if I chose, or start breaking stuff, just upgrade the rear end and all the brackets would line up. So sorry, this is kind of a long video. Looks like it's about 15.5 minutes long, but that's where I'm at. And oh yeah, this is my other baby. This is the last project I made. This Scarlet 55 Chevy 4-wheel drive, 1-ton running gear, LS swapped, yada yada yada. It's basically just a really pretty work truck. So anyways, I'll make some more videos later. I'm gonna get to welding and cutting and grinding and all that stuff that I don't really feel the need to videotape.